So, scatology number 10. That's what the X means. Jez and Jobbie. James.
We are here with Jame Pryce-Davies to talk some shit about the Germans
Formerly from
and the
Rumblefish.
Japanese.
And Mickey Rourke. So, Mickey Rourke.
Watch out for that guy.
Let's just dive in.
He's a racist.
And
Oh,
currently
he's
with
not. How dare you? That's terrible.
formerly Rumblefish, currently guitarist, singer, songwriter for KAYSO GRAND.
Grande, the big cheese coming
Yes.
at you.
KAYSO GRAND. That's me.
KAYSO? That sounds
how do you
very
pronounce it?
German.
That's right.
Did I pronounce it wrong?
You're like the reverse. What's his fault? Basil Fawlty. He's like, don't mention the war.
Yeah,
don't
mention
mention
it.
the Germans. I thought I got away with it before, but
Yeah, don't mention the Germans on this podcast.
No, Jeremy and the Germans.
He'll go down a rabbit hole for sure.
But the good thing is that coming up in
you
this
can be
episode,
racist against them, and that's okay.
this episode coming
Yeah.
right up,
They've got a
maybe
history.
the first time that I don't mention Dr. Seuss. Watch me go.
I'd never got into Dr. Seuss.
Oh, I love it, man.
Okay.
I love it.
He just
I bring it
fucking
up
did
as much as I can.
Greatest intro of all time.
He just did it.
Cut into the.
He just did. You had to put the Seuss in there.
I
didn't
had
you?
to chuck the Seuss
You
in,
had
man.
to put the Seuss.
I had to go the Seuss. Gotta love it. Gotta love it. Gotta love it, Rob.
Woke up. One night in the middle of the night, he woke up, got some stuff, and just a few things. I think like a book and a bag, and that was about it. Got onto a train. That was a terrible pour. Got onto a train and got to. Oh, I've been to New York. Where's that? Coney Island. He got to about Coney Island and realised he didn't remember who he was.
Amnesia.
I've been there.
Yeah. And it never came back.
Really?
No. And so the reason the doco was
Shit.
called Unknown White Male is because he obviously kind of freaked out and alerted the authorities. And they said, well, where do you live? And he had no identification with him. And so they put him into a mental hospital, basically. And they said, what's your name? He said, I don't know. And so they just labelled him Unknown White Male. And all they had was he had a book with a bookmark in it, like a ripped out piece of paper with someone's number on it. Pardon me. But they said the moment where he woke up and then just went sort of mindlessly onto the train, got his stuff ready, went onto a train, they said that was the Fugway moment or zone or state. He was in a state of
fugue.
fugue.
Yeah.
How do you say it? Yeah.
I think they just call it fugue. Fugue state. Yeah, fugue
Where he was
state.
sort of unconscious but awake. Yeah. So that's what I always think of when.
bit like sleepwalking, kind of.
Yes. Yeah.
Fugue state. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was really, really interesting.
There but not there.
There but not there. And eventually they got in touch. He had to sign. And he's freaking out, obviously, because he doesn't even know who he is. And eventually they said, well, for you to get into this mental home, hospice, whatever, you need to sign for it because here's our paperwork. And he said, what am I going to sign? I said, well, I don't know. And he just unconsciously wrote his name.
Oh.
And his name was Andrew or whatever it was. And that was the in the doco, it says that was the first thing that I was like, wow, I know my name.
Wow.
And the number that he had was the mum of a very vague acquaintance that he'd met in New York. He wanted to get in touch with her for some other reason before he completely lost the plot. And he couldn't get through to them because they didn't know who he was. But eventually, that person was like, "Oh, I keep getting a call from this number. Do you know who this is?" And eventually they picked it up. And the woman that he did know, the daughter of the mother that he was trying to get in touch with, happened to be there. And they said, "Hang on, I think I know who this guy is." And then from there, he sort of started the journey back to working out who he was. And then he got back in touch with his family. And at no point, at least in the doco, at no point did it all sort of fall into place. He had to start from scratch.
Wow.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine.
It is.
It was... What was bizarre about it is because he was fairly well off. Like, he was working in finance in New York. He had quite a nice loft apartment in Manhattan somewhere. He was doing quite well for himself. And as a result, he had like home video of much of his life before that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
And really, really interesting about the whole nature versus nurture thing, because he became a different person. Like, you can...
A personality change.
Personality change, yeah. Because his personality was essentially reset without all of that prior conditioning and experience.
That's interesting.
And he became sort of this quite sensitive, nice person. And I think the doco left him, he was pursuing photography and doing something a bit more creative or artistic or something, not making a value judgment about that, but that's what he fell into, and that's what he decided he was going to pursue now that he was starting life again. And his footage from before, he was a little bit cheeky and kind of a dick. And yeah.
A bit like him.
Did they ever find out what caused this?
Cheeky.
The only thing that they said was...
Disruption?
The only thing they found was he did have a tumour.
Right.
Which was benign. But he was swimming one day after the event, and that erupted, and he had to go to the hospital, and he was fine, a little bit like a stroke sort of thing, but not quite a stroke. And
same kind of impact.
Pressure
on the brain.
Yeah, he had to go to hospital and get it all checked out and everything. But they said this wasn't. They said that it was unconclusive, that had made an impact on what had happened to him. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what I think of every time I see that word, is that.
Yeah,
that
right.
doco.
Fugue state.
Yeah.
Yeah, fugue.
See, I only know the word fugue.
It's like sleepwalking.
You're
there, but you're not.
A certain type of Baroque music is fugue. It's a fugue. It's like a certain type of song. Fugue.
Okay.
Oh, I know the psychological term,
right.
Like what you're talking about, James. I'm familiar with that. Scary though. Like, can you imagine waking up tomorrow?
Oh my God, it's impossible.
Don't know your own name.
Yeah. That's right. Waking up tomorrow, don't know your own name.
Watch family videos that you don't remember.
Yeah,
and nothing's jogging his memory. Like
nothing at all is jogging his memory.
His sister came back from the UK.
He's watching himself on home movies, and it's not jogging his memory.
Nothing at all. Yeah, he met his sister and his family and stuff, and she went through the strange thing. She was doing interviews as part of the doco, and she sort of said, she went through like a grieving process of sort because the brother that she knew was now gone. And
in many respects, yes.
Yeah, and she was sort of sad about that. Yeah, really fascinating. But you know what interests me now, thinking about it? I saw that doco like 2011 or something. It's always sort of stuck with me. Unknown White Male is the name of the doco. But how does a movie like that even get made? Because think about it, a documentarian has to be in the
true story, right?
It's his story, yeah.
It is. A documentary is always about a true story.
But how do you make? What do you mean? Like,
how did they find out that this story was happening? Like you could arguably make a documentary about how the filmmaker just happened to know him or just happened to be close to the situation. Were they doing film stuff at the mental home, the mental asylum when he came in? And they thought, hang on a second, this is an interesting story. How did they get clued? How did that all sort of come about?
Well,
because it's a fascinating story and it just seems like a...
Well, my guess would be, as a filmmaker, they probably already had the idea they wanted to do a narrative on amnesia.
Right.
and researched the case and came across him. That's probably the way it went, but I don't know.
The reason I bring it up though, Rob, is that the doco, more like it takes place just after he's been released from hospital. So it's got the footage.
As in he's in the doco?
Yeah.
No actors?
No. Yeah, it's a documentary. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, well, it
And
must have been a tip-off or something.
They've interviewed him because in the mental asylum they thought this is an interesting case. Let's interview this guy and videotape it, which they did, and that's all in the documentary as well. And it's him sort of talking about the fact that he can't remember anything and how you can clearly see he's disturbed about all of this. But then directly after that, him being reacquainted with his family and everything like that seems to happen just after he gets out of the, or within weeks of being out of the.
Yeah, there are a few
hospital.
docos.
So I'm just like, how do they know someone to get a camera and click record?
There are a few documentaries that are a bit like that they start filming somebody, and then I guess it's almost quantum mechanical that the art of observation actually changes the story, and then thank fuck they've got the cameras there. So it's not the only doco that I've heard of that starts off on just like, this is interesting, blah, blah, blah. Let's point the cameras at this guy, and then bang.
Yeah.
It just gets more and more interesting and more intense and more unexpected. You know?
Yeah, it's tremendously awesome.
You might be interested in the doco where you've got the 3 twins who were separated at birth, all adopted out.
Triplets, then.
Yeah, triplets. Separated at birth.
Were they all non-identical, or were 2 of them
all identical?
Oh,
and
wait,
then they all ended up. No, all 3 were identical.
Only
triplets.
the twins were identical.
No, the triplets. There was 3 of them.
You can only have 2 identical, I think.
They
Triplets.
all looked the same. I'm pretty sure all 3 were identical.
Anyway,
an egg can probably separate 3 ways. If it can separate 2
some
ways, why not 3
I don't
ways?
mind a 3-way.
I don't know. For some reason, I only thought you could have 2 identical, and then the other one would be a paternal twin. But anyway,
You might
we
be
need to
right.
look this up. We
You
need
might
to
be
Google
right.
it.
But
Ask Jeeves.
it is a good doco because they all end up meeting each other in adolescence.
And how do their lives play out?
Well, how the first 2 met was he went. One of the triplets went to uni, and all these people were coming up to him saying, "Oh, you're whatever his name was. You're Fred."
Yeah.
And he's like, "No, I'm not Fred. I'm Harry, or whatever their names were."
Oh, wow.
And this kept on happening. Oh, Fred.
Footnote.
So was
Fred.
Fred studying at that university?
The year before. But
The
he
year
had
before?
left. He had left the year before.
Right. I thought you were going to say then they met each other on
Footnote.
campus, and he's pretty much
You
looking
can
at
have
a
No,
mirror.
identical triplets.
it was the people who knew the brother saying to him, "You're Fred." And
Oh, really?
he eventually cottoned on to the fact that,
Someone
oh
else
shit,
out there.
there's
looked
someone
like-
Wow.
out there that looks exactly like me.
Hmm.
And they all ended up meeting eventually and finding out that they were all adopted out.
Wow.
But that was back in the days where nobody was told that they were their history. You were just adopted and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Your history was kind of gone.
Erased.
Yeah.
I was reading this. I was listening. Well, I read this book by this guy Sebastian Junger called Tribe, but I think he had written something else. He was talking about political leanings and the genetics. He sort of, and I'm persuaded by this line of thought that a lot of which way you sort of vote is genetically determined. And basically, to support that thesis, he brought up similar things of like twins separated at birth who had been then raised in very different situations, but then at least 50% of the time or greater, they still ended up voting the same way. They still ended up having the same political leanings.
Wow.
That's what happens in this doco too. Like they all did the same course, I think.
Yeah, why would
They
they?
all
Why
had-
would they do all that? Yeah.
They all had, I think, girlfriends with the same name or something.
Yes, I've
bizarre
heard
like
things.
that.
I've heard things
Oh,
like that.
that's
Yeah.
freaky.
Oh,
Yeah.
it was really freaky.
Yeah.
It's a good doco. I just wish I remember what it was called. It's about triplets who were separated via adoption, and they all grew up and had pretty much. It's one of the nurture kind of studies
Yeah.
where, no, nature kind of studies,
Nature and nurture.
Yeah. Yeah.
where they're all genetically virtually identical, and they all kind of did the same things in life,
Yes.
Hmm.
and
Yes.
then met later on in life, and were like, "What? Your girlfriend was that name? That's my girlfriend's name, or my wife." Or whatever."
Yes, I've heard of
Like,
cases like
crazy
that. Yeah.
stuff like that.
Very interesting how.
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
You'd
makes
probably
you
like
wonder.
that doco. I wish I remember the name.
Something about twins and then getting
I think it's called Three Strangers.
three strangers. And
Three
then what happened to the
strangers.
third one? Was he like a crackhead?
Yeah, how did they
or
meet up with
something?
No,
the third one?
same thing, man. Same thing. They
Someone
all
saying, "Oh, you look like such and
they
such."
were all very no. What happened with the third one was, when the first two met, it became a media thing,
Right.
and that's when the third
Hmm.
one saw the two dudes in the media, and went, "Oh shit,
I
Right.
think.
I'm the same age.
Whoa.
I look exactly like them too."
Hmm.
and then
And
then
then
there was
hooked up-
three.
Then
Oh,
hooked up
wow.
with them. Yeah,
That's cool.
it was crazy.
I fucking
Three
love,
Strangers, I think it's called.
I fucking love a good documentary.
Yeah, same goes, man.
Oh
Mm.
man,
Mm-hmm.
I've watched more, or I've been more impacted by and sought out documentary films, or like films based on real life events than just
Mm.
purely fictional ones. I don't know what that's about, but
Oh, I'm the
Reality is
same.
far more interesting.
I'm
it
the
can
same.
be
Fiction.
if the story, if it's told well enough and then
Mhm.
whatever. But
Mhm.
I'm a non-fiction dude by a long way.
yeah, right.
You said you were going to talk about Star Wars.
Star Wars.
Yeah.
I love Star Wars.
I love Star Wars as
You
well.
love Star Wars.
Are we going to talk about the state of Star Wars today?
Well, we're going
Since
from
Disney bought it,
non-fiction to fiction. So do your Star Wars
no,
thing.
it's not non-fiction. The Force, man, that is the guiding principle of the universe.
What do they call them again? Meti.
I was telling.
What's the
So-
metachlorines or whatever
Oh,
they call
mid-
it?
midi-
I don't like
Midichlorians.
that. That's silly.
Midichlorians.
That's just silly.
It purifies your pool as well as being a guiding force.
Yeah. Yeah, Robbie was asking me about you. I'm like, oh, well, this, that. And he likes Star Wars, you know. And Robbie just doesn't like anything fantasy related at all.
Well, let's
So-
talk about that. What is it about? Purely just asking. Like, I'm not going to try and... Because I'm not really a fantasy nut. I'm in, getting back to that word, fugue. That's how I choose to
Fugue.
pronounce it. Fugue. I'm sort of an interesting
Fudge.
place.
I like fudge.
Do you pack it? I
Only
watched...
when I get the chance.
I watched that Joker movie just recently with my girlfriend,
Oh.
and I
really?
did not enjoy it at all.
Is it shit?
Right.
No, it's not saying that it's shit. I don't think it's as good as people are saying it is.
I've heard a
But
lot
it's
of people
definitely not-
rave about it.
It's
I haven't
definitely
seen it.
not bad. It's I would say to someone wanting to see a really good gritty city crime-ridden story and then an outcast loner mentally ill person, I'd just say watch Taxi Driver. That's a way superior
I've heard
film.
the comparison before.
Taxi
actually,
Driver's
yeah.
a way better movie.
Right.
But people are treating this like it's Taxi Driver. And to them I say tap the brakes, time out.
Mm.
But I would never say it's a bad film. But the thing is that my Fugueway state with films at the moment, I would normally be all over that with a red rash. But I was fucking depressed by that movie.
Hmm?
It was sad. It was just horrible after horrible thing. Like they go, maybe it's because I've gotten back into my disability support and I've been hearing these horrible stories of, but they go into this movie and part of me, I guess I'm sort of, is it meta criticism where you kind of wonder, why are people finding this entertaining? You know,
There's
like I'm sitting watching and I'm thinking, this is depressing. This is, okay, they've made it really gritty and realistic. Credit to them. And Joaquin Phoenix has done a great job at you know, showing someone who's mentally ill. He's done a, you know, pretty good job. And at the end, it kind of sort of dovetails into the Batman stuff in a bit more.
Batman is in the film?
Yeah, he's young. I guess I don't want to give any more
Yeah, no
away.
spoilers.
You've got to expect it though.
It does.
It's a Batman universe.
I didn't
film.
like that because I'm a bit done with comic book movies, but it was dovetailing back into that stuff, and so then it becomes a bit more fantastical. But the first two acts, it's just this guy really down on his luck, and him struggling and being really quite realistically depicted as having a whole stack of mental illnesses and troubles, and just horrible things happening to him.
That's the gist of it, right? It's the making of the Joker.
Yeah. But I guess as opposed to other comic book films, it was grittily, very gritty and very realistic. It didn't get it. It only became a tad of fantasy comic book stuff at the end, and even then, it still remained fairly grounded. And I was watching that, and I had to watch. I had to watch that Hobbs and Shaw movie, that fucking spin-off of the Fast and Furious with The Rock and Jason Statham.
Awesome.
It actually wasn't.
No,
and I love those shit movies.
Yeah,
I
so do
fucking
I.
love the Fast and Furious movies. They're great modern shit movies.
Mm-hmm.
And people kind of turn their noses up to them. I'm like, you don't get it. You don't get it.
Yeah.
Everyone else in the movie knows it's shit except Vin Diesel. And it shows. He commits 100%. He thinks the material is A grade.
Yeah.
But everyone else is in on the joke. I'm sure they've had to edit them out, winking at the camera in between takes and stuff like that, because they're just like, really? You know. And so I went into that Hobbs and Shaw movie thinking, this is going to be great. This is going to be an awesome shit movie. Two things. It went for 2.5 hours.
Oh no.
It was just like, and it was so loud the entire time. I don't know if I'm just getting old or something like that. But I left it and I was like, okay. Again, playing armchair psychologist, you would have better insight, you know, having studied this stuff. But I'm like, okay, basically The Rock and Jason Statham's character, they're basically very narcissistic personalities. And they're the good guys. They're kind of dicks, really. They're not nice people. You wouldn't enjoy being in their company. And their character is basically, I'm awesome, I'm the best, and that's why you should like me. And that's the whole gist of the movie. And so I'm watching that, and I'm like, I guess I'm like watching these and trying to sort of make sense of what does that say about our society. Do you know what I mean? And I walked out of the Joker feeling the same thing. I was like, why are people finding this so entertaining? It's almost too real in some senses. There's a scene in the film, this is not a spoiler, but there's a scene in the movie where he's been having trouble with like getting mugged and stuff like that. It's one of the many horrible things that happens to Joaquin Phoenix's character in the film. And then he gets, one of his clown guys said, here's about him getting jumped and beaten up and robbed. And he says, here you go, here's a gun. You know, he'd take a gun, take care of yourself, whatever. And so he's this crazy guy with this 6-shooter walking the streets, and that's just the plot of the film. But then he has this job as a clown. Sorry to back up a bit. He has this job as a clown, and he goes around and he does whatever a clown does. You know, he helps in electronic store. He's like waving a sign at the start of the movie. You know, bargains galore, all this sort of stuff. And then it cuts to him. He's in a hospital, like a children's hospital, like as a performer kind of thing. And you know, this is kind of the world that they're trying to paint of what would a clown. They're trying to explain why he would be wearing the makeup and then also trying to explain, okay, well, now he's got the makeup. He works for like a clown agency. What do they actually do? And so one of his gigs is at this children's hospital. I don't even really think things like that quite work in the way that they depicted them, but it's a movie. They've got to make it happen. So they did. And he's in there and he's got this gun with him and he's sort of dancing in front of these kids. And this 6-shooter like falls out of his shoe or whatever it is and just bounces on the ground. And no one really laughed in the audience, but to me that was kind of a funny bit. And by the way, the movie's directed by Todd Phillips, who did
He's a comic director, isn't he?
Yeah, he did the Hangover movies.
Oh, right, yeah.
Right? So, this guy knows his comedy
The Hangover movie.
Yeah,
There was
let's
only
not
one.
talk about the 2 and 3.
There was one and then there were 2 mistakes, basically.
I watched the first one. I haven't seen that in like 12 years or something, and I watched it again recently, and it still holds up pretty well.
Sure.
It's pretty funny.
Mm-hmm.
But
It was fucking funny the first time I saw it. Man.
oh yeah, man, it was terrific. Really great fun. And only not under 100 minutes.
Oh,
There's
really?
something to be said about a under 2 hours film.
Mhm.
Anyway,
These days anyway.
Well, it has to be a
Christ.
pretty damn good film to go past an hour and a half. That's for
They
sure.
keep going though. These days they keep going and going and going and going. But that being said,
Need a lot of
the
content.
latest
for 2
Tarantino
hours.
film,
that was
Once
pretty
Upon
long.
a Time in Hollywood, was quite long. And when I saw that it was going to be really long, I'm like, oh shit, got to sit in the theater for that long. But fuck, man,
Yeah,
I love that movie.
I loved it.
That was my favorite movie of
Brilliant.
the year,
You
which is
couldn't-
not exactly a hot take. I'm sure it's a lot of people's favorite movies, but
there's no way you could
Tarantino's
do, for
brilliant.
example, Transformers for 2 hours.
They
That would-
try.
that
They
would
do.
suck.
They try.
they do.
Yeah.
Those movies. I'm telling you, those movies go over 2 hours.
Yeah.
God.
It's part of this new thing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, just quickly back on the gun falls out, and it's kind of this funny moment because he's at this children's hospital, and there's like kids with cancer and stuff like that, and here he is with this gun, and it's this kind of darkly comedic moment. But it is sort of funny. But that's the only funny moment in the movie, and the audience didn't really even laugh. I'm not sure if it was supposed to be funny. Is my point. I don't know how the filmmaker intended it, but the audience didn't really know how to. They were still kind of adjusting to the tone of the film. And after that, it was just like depression fest. And so that and the Hobbs Shaw's movie, I kind of walked out of it thinking, what are people getting from this? That was my question. I wasn't, taken in by the story or really like blown away by it. I was kind of sad and depressed, and it just made me feel a bit. It just left me with questions about what are people getting from this? Discuss.
Well, I haven't seen the film.
You haven't seen
it's-
it.
it's
Sorry,
hard-
I'm
it's hard to know.
completely
No, that's fine. You've painted a good picture, though. I haven't seen it either, but I do want to see it now that you've described it that way.
It'd be interesting to get your take,
Mm.
given your work.
Well, we were talking about Into the Wild before.
Yep.
That was one of my psychology assignments,
Why?
I had to analyse the whole film, write out what the psychology of McCandless,
McCandles. Yeah.
however you say it,
Yeah.
what was going on for him.
What was your takeaway? Because I had going into that film. I'll just quickly say this. Going into that film, I was so excited about the release of that movie. I had the soundtrack and everything in advance.
The Joker.
No.
Into the Wild.
Into the
Wild.
Wild. Okay,
Yeah.
right.
And I was so excited for it. I went for I was in my early 20s. I went for my first little journey on my own down to Tasmania, listening to all of the music. I hadn't even seen the movie yet. And so I was so ready for that movie, and it hit the spot for me. But then years later, I came back to it, maybe 5 or so years later, and I had a completely different sort of perspective. But what was your takeaway?
Oh, well, I didn't know the film existed up until, we had 4 films to choose from. A character we had to analyse from 4 different films, and I chose Into the Wild. Don't know why, just random, whatever. Watched the film. Takeaway from that movie. Oh, just going back to my assignment. Okay, so the main character, McCandless. he basically graduated uni. He came from a very well-to-do home. Always had his needs sorted, and it's kind of anarchistic. He kind of got the shits with
Society.
yeah, kind of got the shits and went off to see
Absconded.
if he could do his own thing. But kids do that anyway. But he went.
He went even further.
Extreme. He
went
it wasn't
even
like a
further.
gash year. It was he wanted
Yeah.
to live on the land and be completely self-sufficient,
Yeah,
and he wanted
Kind of-
nothing to do with society.
kind of screwed himself up in the process because he
Died.
tried a bit of research, but
Yeah.
didn't work out. If he lived a few more years before doing that, he might have been all right. But he was still young and dumb,
Mm.
basically. If that's fair to say. Sorry, McCandless people.
Yeah. I thought it was an interesting. Sorry, were you gonna?
No, that's it. Yeah. Yeah.
I thought it.
Just a summary.
Looking back on it, like, because I went into the film, I guess, wanting to idolize a character like him, and I think I walked out of that film with that expectation and desire satisfied. But then looking back on it slightly older, I sort of thought I saw some of the inconsistencies and faults in his thinking around some things,
Mm-hmm.
but they address them in the film.
Mm.
Yeah, they kind of put those, like, there's the scene with the two middle-aged hippies, the
Mhm.
couple.
Where he's looking for some wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Because he's still
woman,
young.
and the woman sort of says, you know, your parents would be absolutely
Yeah.
worried about you, and you see him kind of getting choked up by that.
Mm.
But I guess the movie is he's running. That's the whole
Mm.
thing of the movie, is kind of running away
Mm.
from it. And so, yeah, initially I probably looked at that and thought, oh, whatever, keep running, man, cool. But then later on, I just sort of thought, no, it's sort of not a harsh critique of him in any sense, but it does sort of show faults in his thinking. And
It was a very Freudian film. Like they had a lot
Really?
of Freudian symbolism in that.
like what?
Well, you had the mummy and daddy issues,
Yeah.
and there's a few still shots of, caves,
Oh.
and they also had the gates of the uni. There was a lot of Freudian symbolism.
So what does that all mean? Caves and what's that supposed to symbol?
Oh, well, if you go
Vagina.
If you go Freudian
what?
and the
Vagina.
yeah, and the phallic symbols too. They had phallic symbols in there too.
Oh, painted in the cave.
So
The
he
cave
had-
itself is
Yeah,
vaginal.
It was a very
And they
Freudian
were phallic.
film.
And the gates, as you said, the gates opening, that's very
Yeah,
Freudian.
there was lots of Freudian stuff in there, but
Mm.
I guess that's why that was one of the films we had to choose
Yeah, I'm sure.
to pick apart the Freudian stuff.
Mm.
But isn't it one of those things? If you look for it, you can see it anywhere. Is that the problem where
No.
viewing symbolism, or you think it was put in there intentionally?
Intentionally, yeah, for sure.
Rightio. Well, I'll have to go back, brush up on my Freud
Freudian.
before I check that stuff out.
Freudianisms.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know much about Freud?
I don't know much about Freud.
Freud's, it's all about sex. Every human behavior is motivated deeply by sex. That's basically Freud in a nutshell.
I might be
Right.
able to dig up my assignment.
Is that a fair
can flick it to you.
representation? Is that a fair, accurate representation of what Jeremy just said?
Freud,
Yeah.
he said that was the primary motivator, sex and aggression.
I've been at parties when I saw. Now I'm going to go out a limb
And
here.
cocaine.
I'm going to ruffle some feathers, but I saw a guy show up to a party in my early 20s, sort of a cool party, young people, generally a bit more liberal out there, whatever. And he's got a horoscope book.
Mm.
And I was like, you want to get laid. That's the only reason. Because he's got the book wanting to engage engage people in conversation about this book because it's just so amazing. No dude's into fucking horoscope.
No.
They're just
It's like
not.
dudes that are into yoga.
Exactly.
They just
Except yoga's beneficial.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 100%. So when I see that sort of stuff, I'm sure there's an equivalent. Like women see other women do similar kind of transparently hunting style behavior.
Sure.
And they just kind of roll their eyes and go, oh, God, this fucking girl, seriously?
Mm-hmm.
But guys like that I've seen, I've just been like, oh, that he's not a person, actually. He's just a wanting to get laid machine.
Mm-hmm.
That's he's a robot trying.
Ow, sex machine.
Is this what'll do it? This fucking horoscope book?
I have a book on my shelf called Sun Signs
And
by
you
Linda
got
Goodman.
yourself some pussy, didn't you?
One.
Exactly. One for a long time.
One
with
for a
lot of
long
kids.
time. But that wasn't part of the
Sun signs. It got him laid, man.
that,
Got him
no,
a family.
that was not part of the
Was that your
process of
exegetical
courting.
analysis of the This book got me laid. The end. Interesting,
shit.
Rob. This is supposed to be a 3,000 word essay.
I'm not talking about predicting future. I'm more interested from the personality side of things.
It's only 5 words. You know, this book got me laid. But,
I
that'll
don't
work.
think that book got me laid, but
Okay.
I do have that on my shelf, yes.
So what's it about?
Oh, Gemini, Cancer, Capricorns, Sagittarians, Aquarians, Scorpions. What are the rest? Taurus, Virgo.
They've all got these personality traits.
Personality,
and all of that
yeah.
sort of stuff.
It's more about personality than saying, oh, your lucky numbers are 5 and 6. Yeah, fuck that.
Sorry to look at my watch. The only reason I did that is because you
Rude.
brought up numerology, and lately I've been seeing it's like the three numbers at the same time. I might be going not now, but
No.
twice today I did that.
Like 11-11.
Yes, and 1-11, stuff like that. But anyway,
I see 11-11 all the time. What's the go with that? Heaps of people talk about that.
Do they?
Seeing 11-11 on the clock.
okay.
Do you ever notice 11-11?
Oh, I sure do. I see 11s everywhere. But it's my favourite number, so it's kind of, I guess, that whole thing about if you expect to see it, you'll see it. So I see 11s everywhere because it's my favourite number. So it's no surprise that I see 11 everywhere.
We're in the realm of pseudoscience.
Nothing wrong with that.
Or
we
is there?
We live in the age of scientific materialism, and I've got a problem with that. Unless it's scientifically measurable, it's not even real. That bothers me.
It'd be good to quantify things like
Some things aren't quantifiable. Can you
personality.
quantify love.
Because we've already quantified other personality types. Why not try to quantify it with like you were saying, the star signs? I think it's possible. Just do it the way you do with psychology.
have a
Series of
hypothesis.
questions and
Create a hypothesis and test it. That is science in a nutshell. So if you have a hypothesis that
and then you do
star signs are somehow quantifiable, test it.
then
I'm
you
sure
do
they
your,
have, and they've
Failed.
They've come
Yeah,
up
it's like
wanting-
all the psychic tests. They never
really
work.
They're never
convincing.
provable. Yeah.
They have tried,
Mm.
but that was back in the 60s.
They've done more since then. It's not just the 60s.
James Randi, that skeptic, he's got $1 million reward for anyone who's able to prove psychic powers
Mm.
under supervision.
The thing is, though, if somebody is truly psychic,
Yeah.
why would they feel the need to go in that competition?
To make $1 million.
But they don't care about $1 million because they realise that that's just part of the capitalist bullshit.
But many have, Jez.
Yeah, the frauds do.
Have you ever
But
seen
someone
that?
who's truly psychic is just like, well, there's more to life than money.
Have you ever
And
seen
more
that?
to life than proving James
But
Randi
you're
wrong.
assuming psychics are more enlightened,
Perhaps they are.
Have you ever seen that
Like
interview?
the Jedi, man.
like the Jedi.
Yeah.
The interview with the psychic. I think it was a Russian, and the Russian sitting down interviewing a psychic, and he just slaps him in the fucking head, and
What?
he says,
The
how come you
interviewer
didn't?
does.
Yeah, he does. He goes, how come you didn't see that fucking coming?
There's this great Sean McCullough.
You know what I can see coming?
What's that?
Towards the end of November, we're heading to Melbourne. So if you are in Melbourne on the 23rd of November, check out Blues Arcadia. We're playing at the Catfish on the Sunday. I think there's going to be some radio shows. It's going to be a duo show with our fearless leaders, Harvey and Alan. And yeah, that's all of my plugs.
Just before I've got to say, we do have a single coming out also, Somebody Like You, KAYSO GRAND. Stay tuned for that. Exact release date has not been yet determined, but I'll show you guys later on. We've got the artwork for it. It's all ready to go.
Yeah, nice, man.
Yeah, so
Cool.
that one's been a while in the coming. It's been a good while since we've released some music, so it'd be good to get that one out there for sure.
Yeah, sweet.
Stay tuned. That is the lesson.
Yo.
on that.
Do you have a website or something we can pop up on the screen?
Yeah, so the Facebook is facebook.com/KAYSO band. That's a KAYSO band. That's the Facebook. And our website is onepage.link.com/KAYSO GRAND.
Well, you'll definitely be able to find that website link through the Facebook page. So if you look up KAYSO GRAND or Facebook/KAYSO band, you'll definitely be able to find the website. If that's a difficult thing to remember, that one page link, but we'll definitely flash that up on screen too, man. It's
Thank you.
on your screen right now. There's the website. Yeah. How about you, Jobbie?
Scatology podcast each week with brilliance.
Thanks for having me. Is this the end? Is that what's happening?
No. What's happening is I'm asking you, what other you wanted to say something about something pseudoscientific.
We've done.
Oh, you finished it? You are.
He's
finished
off
with
the
that?
pseudoscience. He's just on the plugs.
Plugs.
Well, what I was you were saying about scientific materialism. And you're a man of science. I have to say, like, I've done a moral inventory about, what's real and religion and whether it's false and blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, I don't actually know. Like, I don't do any of the research on any of this stuff, and no one really does. A lot of people speak with certainty, and
A lot of people speak with certainty.
On both
There's
sides of the argument, too.
on both sides of the argument. But unless they're the experts, I'm speaking more about people like me who don't actually have any academic work behind whatever. They've read someone else's work or they've watched some debates or something like that. But really where I fall is, like, I was watching on Netflix some doco. It'll come to me. The doco about, this is the podcast, is I can't remember. It's the podcast of I can't remember the name of.
Can't remember shit.
Can't remember the name of the thing. Bob Lazar, that doco about the UFOs.
What's that called? Area 51.
Area 51 and
UFOs.
UFOs or something like that.
UFOs or something like that. Yeah.
Now, I
haven't seen it.
I listened to
heard about
two podcasts about from him and another guy who had seen some UFOs, Air Force pilot or something like that.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan one.
Yeah, man.
And I was, like, really transfixed and kind of interested and quite persuaded. I'd sort of written a lot of that stuff off, or just it wasn't in on my radar, so to speak. And then these guys came in who weren't...
Jeremy Corbell.
Yes.
The
filmmaker.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But these guys weren't making any claims. Like, the thing that always turns me off with these fraudsters and conspiracy theory types is that they'll notice that something's wrong, or they'll know, they'll see an event or whatever it is, but then they'll start piling on, oh, they killed Kennedy because he was going to get rid of the silver dollar. This is what they'll say. And I'll think to myself, how would you know anything about the inner machinations of government. You know, why, say if he was killed, how could you possibly know that? Because you're basically just me, you know, and maybe they would come up with a follow-up of, well, you know, we got this proof from whatever the case may be. But where they always go wrong, my point is that these guys weren't doing that. They just were speaking about what they had observed. And they weren't saying, well, and then it was doing this, and this must mean this, and the aliens are here to do such and such. They didn't say any of that stuff. They just spoke, mainly they just spoke to what their observations had been, which struck me as being more credible. But then I went and watched the documentary, and probably it's like a fault of, probably it's just a fault of how much information they actually have. Like, the guy doesn't have footage of what he's seen in Area 51. So it's a lot of just interviews and stuff like that, and him just talking about things.
Jeremy brought this up yesterday, actually.
But the point is that I guess I always fall on the side of the rational. What the rational explanation is because there's more information, simply because there's more information behind it. And I like sort of diving in and finding out more stuff. Whereas a lot of that other alternate information strikes me as being a bit thin.
So I guess the question is...
But purely that's why I go one way or the other, is because I like depth and I find the other stuff not to be... I find it shallow, but that's really more about what I feel. It's got... It doesn't necessarily... Like I said, I've got no scholarship behind what it is that I'm doing. I'm not the one finding the proof. I'm just liking one over the other because I prefer the feeling that this type of information gives me, because it strikes me as being more complete and more depth than the other type. Do you know what I mean?
At the end of the day, what's your conclusion?
Well, it's just that. It's just how compelling is your story?
On Area 51.
On Area 51.
What's your conclusion? Don't know?
I don't know.
Okay, that's a cool conclusion. I respect that.
Yeah, I was... Did you watch that doco?
I haven't seen it, but it's on my to-do list.
Yeah. It was... He seems to be a pretty credible guy, the Bob Lazar, whatever.
He seems like a pretty level-headed guy.
Interesting guy, but...
He's making some wild fucking claims, though.
He is, but it wasn't even that. The fucking filmmaker made this choice to have in between, probably about at 5 different points with phones getting messages, 5 different points, he had these kind of B+ level written monologues about the nature of reality and beliefs and stuff over the top of like grainy footage from the 60s and like government documents and stuff, how they do in documentaries and things. Voiced by Mickey Rourke.
Mickey Rourke?
He doesn't have work. And so he's just kind of like, he's just like, what? A UFO documentary? I get to talk about reality or some shit. How much you paying me? Yeah. I'll do that. And he's kind of got this real drawl. He's like, belief is like a tempering, a horrible temptress. One time it's with you, and then you leave it behind later on. What the fuck? And he's just like, Mickey Rourke.
Yeah. Give me the script and pay me.
Keep getting them checks, Mickey Rourke. And so little things like that, I was just like, probably just could have just, stuck to the Bob Lazar interviews. I would have been more compelled.
I really enjoyed, you brought up the podcast that he did with Joe Rogan. I really enjoyed that interview, actually. I know, Robbie, you probably didn't even watch it, or you probably fucking hated it.
No, I watched the whole thing. I watched the whole thing. The Joe Rogan and Bob Lazar.
Netflix.
No, I use YouTube.
Oh, okay. I'm big YouTube.
Yeah, but it's on YouTube too.
I've got access to Netflix, so I do want to watch it. And I also want to watch that Sturgill Simpson thing.
Yeah, man.
You said that was an album on Netflix. That could be like a totally brand new thing.
Do you still smoke the reefer?
Yeah, man.
Okay, you're going to love this movie. You're going to fucking love this movie.
All right.
I don't smoke dope, and I'm watching it, I'm just like, that this is the greatest stoner movie of all time.
Holy shit!
It's like
an album.
Yeah.
An anime set to an album. That to
Yeah.
me is just like that's the new concept album right there.
well, it's a little
That
bit like
idea
The
is
Wall or
fucking
something like
awesome.
that.
Yeah,
A little bit like because The Wall's
like
got
Blood
like
Sugar Sex Magic, even like a narrative throughout the whole record.
yeah, and it's just he's like this country artist.
A masterpiece.
I don't know if it is a masterpiece.
Maybe
or
it's
not.
not.
It might be
No,
a
Blood
complete
Sugar
train.
Sex Magic.
Oh, okay. We're
Yeah, but
back
this
on
the
Chili
Wall,
Peppers.
as you said, the Wall
Yeah,
or Yellow Submarine, even, which was not a masterpiece.
but yeah, it's just like this post-apocalyptic set in Japan with this fucking samurai going about in like a 350 Charger or whatever it is, just blazing through the landscape, this dying city landscape, and this country singer wailing over the top of it,
yeah,
with like out there rock music playing.
so cool.
It's manga, is it? Manga?
I guess I
Anime?
think they call it anime.
Anime,
He went.
Yeah.
but yeah, Japanese cartoons.
He was on
Yeah.
the Rogan podcast.
Yeah, I
he was
saw
talking
it, man.
about it. Yeah, and he's.
I didn't realize that it was actually on Netflix.
It's there.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe he said it was, but
I haven't seen the whole thing. I've been getting into it a little bit, but it's awesome when shit like that happens. I was almost like that when I heard that Metallica were doing the album with fucking that Lulu album with Lou Reed.
I don't know it, man. I'm not a big Metallica guy.
Oh, okay. It's fucking terrible. It's
Yeah,
it's the
right.
it's like the worst album of all time. But the point is when I heard that they were doing an album with Lou Reed, I was like, holy shit. Life is amazing because artists
Because
making
that
crazy
exists.
choices because that happened. But it's a piece of shit. So anyway,
Yeah.
blah blah blah.
But me personally, I'm very skeptical of UFOs or extraterrestrials.
I tend
Very
to fall
skeptical.
that way.
I don't.
I think
personally, the
You're
universe
not
is a big.
skeptical.
Oh no, I am skeptical,
Mm.
but I tend to think it's a fucking big universe, man.
it is a big universe.
So it seems unlikely that life would only have evolved here.
What I was saying before, I don't know if you caught it, and sorry to repeat, but where I get lost with a lot of the UFOologists is that they will come up with theories as to what is happening and the motives of the aliens.
Yeah, that's impossible.
And you see a lot in conspiracy theory as well. It's kind of baked into the formula oftentimes. You know what I mean? And that's where it loses me because I'm like, how would you know? You
Yeah,
know?
it's impossible to know. I can't judge your motives, let
Yeah.
alone a completely alien species.
But that's
Right.
tough when you kind of get into when you want to go down a UFO rabbit hole because so much of the information that's out there is that stuff.
Oh, I know. I
And
know.
so you're
See, I really enjoy reading like UFO magazines and books because I find it absolutely hilarious, right? The depths that they go to into the intergalactic history about the people from the dog people from Sirius B, and it's just nonsense.
Right.
But it's hilarious, right? Like I really get into it, and it is as you said earlier, it is quite shallow because they'll say, oh, this is what happened in the history of the galaxy, but I'm not going to provide any references or footage or
No.
evidence.
Proof.
I'm
later.
just going to say it
and you're
and
going to
hope
believe it or
that
not.
you believe me.
Yeah.
you know? So,
That's how Scientology started.
oh well, there's a buck to be made then.
Oh, yes. Definitely bucks to be made if you start some kind of bullshit and people believe you and throw bucks at you. It happens.
That's it, man. If you can convince like the
Sorry,
Hollywood-
Scientologists.
Hollywood
Gotta love you.
movie stars throw their dollars at you.
Is
You've
this
got it made in the shade, man.
was this like choreographed? You guys put your sunglasses on all of a sudden.
That's the law around here. You got to wear your sunglasses
I feel like you guys are just about to kill me.
so you can feel cool.
And now
We've
you've got
actually
the third
hired a
guy to
hitman. We've
help
hired a hitman.
help
over
bury
here,
the body.
standing in the corner over here.
That's what this is.
Yeah, he's going to beat you to death with a banana.
You will be dead in 3 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Killed by a banana.
Thank you so much for coming
Should we
on,
wrap it?
James.
Yeah,
It's
no
been-
worries. Hopefully
a
this has been
pleasure.
somewhat interesting. I've had fun. How about you guys? Been
No,
right?
no,
Yeah,
no.
fantastic.
No. I hated every second.
We didn't talk
Okay.
about Germans much.
What's to be said about Germans?
Oh, he
Don't
loves
get
them.
me started on Germans, man. We'll be here for another
It's
fucking
Polish.
hour.
Oh, that's right, you're
Polish genetic history.
That didn't really
It
work out
kicks
well,
in.
did it?
Yeah.
The Second World War.
Yeah.
You guys went to war.
A few times. But yes, thank you, James. Let's have a cheers.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on.